Welcome to Everything's Fine. We're shipping on time. Hear the stories behind your favorite games from the creators who built them with your hosts Rick Neal and Gary Geddes. Now let's start the show.
Gary, have you ever used the pause button in any video game?
Often, yeah, if I'm busy.
This is the guy that invented pause.
Get out.
I'm telling you, yeah, it was he, oh my God, he made everything better when he invented the pause button.
Because then
But
we
welcome
could live our
to
lives.
Everything's Fine with Gary and Rick. This week we have a very exciting host and a guest. Did I say host first before
You
guest?
did.
Oh my God, I'm so old. What is happening? Our good friend and legend in the industry that has done so much, you'll find out all about him. Lyle Hall is joining us today from sunny Southern California, where you think it's a fake background, but it's not. It's actually his real
Welcome,
life,
Lyle.
living the
Welcome to
dream.
the show.
Welcome, Lyle, to the show. We're super excited to have a conversation and learn all about things and let you know that everything's fine and we're shipping on time. So,
Hi, Gary. Hi, Rick. Good to see both of you.
Good
yeah,
to see
what do you think? You go first, Gary.
No,
No.
this is exciting for me because Lyle and I have not really met. I
You've
don't
never worked with
think.
Lyle.
I can't remember if we've met. And so I feel like I know you because your names come up in multiple podcasts, and it's like a 6 degrees of separation. We have a lot of mutual friends, including Mark Day and Matt Sibilia. Rick, tell me a little bit about your connection with
I
Lyle.
got to work with him with Mark Day. Was it Callisto? I don't even know if it was Callisto back then. Critical Mass. Somewhere back then is when I met, when I was leaving
I met
EA
you when
and
I worked
working
for
with Mark Day.
Daylight Digital.
Daylight,
back
that's it.
in the early 2000s, and we were doing work for Universal,
Right.
building a Kid Monsters game out of the Universal Monsters IP. And we did work together when you were at Amazon.
Yeah, I hired your team at Amazon
did.
and at another company too.
And at
didn't you?
Unity.
At Unity.
And at Unity.
Yeah.
Yes. So we've worked
Yeah,
together
outsourced.
multiple times. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been lucky enough to know Lyle, and he hasn't kicked me out of his friend circle. So
Now, when
It's
you
been
say Rick hired you, was that like a contract development?
well, yeah, we
gig?
put together a statement of work. We need this work done, and they over delivered. Really, that was Heavy Iron Studios, right?
Okay.
Yep. All three times where Rick was at those three places I mentioned, he hired the team at the studio to do some work. First one was full game based on the Grand Tour IP.
Uh-huh.
And a second time at Unity was, gosh, how many games did we do? I think it was 3 or 4 ports
Yeah.
of games to different platforms, of existing games to different platforms. Yeah.
Wait, were you guys the primary developer for the Grand Tour game at Amazon?
No, there were 3 developers that I mean, we're kind of almost ahead of our time if you think about what Keywords and other studios are trying to do now with the
Right.
multi-studio collaboration. But
Yeah.
Amazon had a team that really led certainly the engine work and
Design.
the design and the technology, the requirements for the product. And then it was us and Electric Square, who we ironically united with as part of Keywords when Keywords owned both of us. But this is prior to that. And they focused on the driving and racing aspects of the game because that was their expertise. And we focused on building tracks and the UI for a 4-player game. I think the thing that's really fun to share about that is the teams that worked on that game are the only teams to have ever shipped a console game in Lumberyard.
That's true. And
Ever.
the only team to ship episodical.
Right, that's true. It's
Right.
worth mentioning we had 13 episodes, day and date, right after the show aired. Our game, which followed the episode each week over the course
Right.
of that season.
And you're leaving
on 3
out Paul
platforms.
Ross, Rally GT. We used his team in Guildford. And then we used the 397 team out of the Netherlands to do the physics and the F1 racing stuff. So yeah, it was
a good
well
project.
over 200 people total on the game, but only 45 butts and seats at Amazon. So we multiple different outports. Well, we had a lot of producers.
The more we talk about this project on the podcast, the more incredible the fact that
we
it's
should have
shipped.
the top, because that whole thing was from Richard Hilleman walking up to me to when we launched 18 months.
With the
And there was
episode, the
one
TV
person on
episode
the
would
team.
play, and then you could drop right into the game, right?
Right.
So
and,
crazy.
Yes,
and,
exactly.
and there was one person on the team when Hilleman said, "Why don't you do this?" 18 months later, and that's
With a
if
new
you've
engine.
Ever been, yeah, if you've ever been at Amazon, you know that's probably the most impressive thing. We built that.
Well, and in general, all of us have been around long enough. Working in a new engine, when is a new engine game ever shipped on time? Don't remember.
To your point, Gary, we would take that as a example of how capable we are of delivering. Well, certainly when I was at Heavy Iron. And I don't think people really, I mean, some people did, but I don't think most people, certainly the biz dev people that we spoke to, truly understood how challenging it is to deliver 13 weekly games, basically, on 2 platforms using a new engine that no one had ever shipped a game on before. So
it was the first time ever Amazon did certification with Sony or Xbox, ever. They've never... Executing freaking license agreement with Ford Motor Company was probably the most effort of anything we did, because they never exercised this. It was a lot of interesting learnings inside of Amazon. It was a great project.
It was a great project.
Yeah.
Well, Rick, good thing you have a big network of super talented people. Like
I just didn't do anything. I just sat around and told everybody else, "You guys should do this." No, it was good to have the Amazon checkbook. So sure.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about history and sort of how you got into the industry, Lyle, because you have accomplished quite a lot. Rick and I are these, producery types, but I look at your background. You've been at huge companies and then sort of entrepreneurial, created a bunch of studios that have executed, like for Rick. For other people, you've executed your own stuff. Talk to us a little bit about how you got into gaming.
Sure. I mean, going back to sort of the origin of gaming, I was an arcade rat as a kid. I had an older brother who I tried to tag along with when he went to the mall so I could just go park myself in the arcade and see how long I could make quarters last. So that's really where the genesis of my passion for games came from, from just a consumption, playing standpoint. I'd come home from school and I'd get on my bike and ride down to 7-Eleven, which was about a 10-minute bike ride, because they had 2 arcade games. I can't remember which ones they were off the top of my head, but they had 2 that were, pretty compelling. So for a 10, 11, 12-year-old, candy and video games were a great combo.
It's good living right there.
I can relate.
It's good. It's good living. And fast forward to being in high school, and I was working at a Babbage's, one of the old school video game stores that became, I guess, GameStop eventually. So I was working there as a junior and senior in high school, and nearby was Virgin Games. This is what, late 80s, I think. And they would come by, folks, team from there would come by, once a week, sometimes a little more often, sometimes a little bit less. So they would drop a couple $100 on whatever the newest stuff was. And eventually we got to know them and found out they were actual game developers. They were down the street and they were making stuff, and they were making stuff that we had in the store. And I always like telling this part of the story. A kid down the street who's my best friend, we both came together. We both got, his dad was literally a rocket scientist, and he brought home a Commodore VIC-20 one day, and I got invited over and I had to get one too. And so that was sort of I think I had a VIC-20 in my house before we had a console, because the first console I think we had was the 2600. So maybe we had that already, but we were gaming, all the time, right. That's for sure. And one of my colleagues at Babbage's got a job at Virgin. He was older. He was in college, trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life. And he's now a lifelong game developer as well, who's worked, across all kinds of different places in this industry. And I think it was just after I had graduated high school, I got a phone call from him, and he said, "Hey, would you be interested in coming to work here? I think you'd be a really great fit. There's an opportunity. I thought of you." And so I went and did the interview, got the job, and the rest is history to a certain extent, but we'll get into some of that detail. So I worked for Virgin for about 3 years, 2.5 years. And the highlights there were, we were doing 8-bit computer games and wanted to get into the console space. And I think that was one of the reasons why my buddy Seth Mendelson, that's the guy who I worked with at Babbage's, who helped me get the entree to interview at Virgin. He and I were both massive console guys, because the console experience was much more analogous to an arcade experience than computer games were at the time.
And when you say console, what console were you playing?
Sega Genesis, Super Nintendo. This is the Sega Genesis, Mega Drive, SNES days. Yep. And so, together and with some other people, I'm sure, we convinced Virgin they needed to be in the console business. And he and I and a few other folks really ran with that. And I don't remember how many Sega Genesis games I produced, but it was a lot of them. A lot of them came from the connection that we had to the UK, being a Virgin company. So out of the UK, there was a ton of Amiga games, and the Amiga was a 68,000 CPU, just like the Sega Genesis was. So that's a great anecdote to share too. So we leveraged a lot of hit Amiga games and converted them to Sega Genesis. And we also, then eventually realized the fiscal success of that business and decided to make our own games. And so I like to joke that one of the things I'm responsible for is bringing David Perry to America. not because I moved him, but I did pick him up from the airport and drove him to his hotel. When we hired him at Virgin, I had worked with David on a couple projects. So there was a game called Overlord, which was actually called Supremacy in the UK. It was originally an Amiga game. It was a real-time strategy game, kind of, ahead of its, well, it wasn't real-time. I think it was turn-based. Just a long time ago, guys. It's like 1990. And so he was the programmer on that. And Nick Broody, another legendary game developer, he was the artist. And this is back when teams were, 2-3 people.
Right.
We teamed up again when they were part of Probe Software, and we did the Terminator. That was my very first Sega Genesis game, was the Terminator. One of my favorite movies of all time. So just an awesome opportunity as a young kid to make a video game out of a movie I loved. And that was David Perry on the programming and Nick Broody on the art. And good old Neil Young was the pro producer of that.
Wow, more connections. So was your first role straight into production? Is that sort of how it worked?
The title was producer, but if you guys recall, you wore many hats, right? You were the producer, you were the tester. Occasionally, you were the designer, or at least
the BD guy. Everything.
A contributor, major contributor to the design. I think that's one of the things that I feel really fortunate to have had the opportunity to get into this industry back at that time, because it was so cottage, and it was who wants to do this, and you could volunteer to learn or just figure it out. So getting that exposure to a lot of creative design. I mean, I'm a kid who had never designed a video game in his life, but I certainly thought it was a amazing life opportunity, and it really has been, my career and my life. I do remember telling my mom, the part I guess I'm skipping is I was supposed to go to college at UCLA. I was, enrolled. I had classes picked. I think I was working like 32 hours a week. They didn't hire me full time originally for whatever reason. And then I went to school in September, and I communicated, this is Graham Devine was my boss, and communicated to him that I was going to be, out a few days a week going forward. And I'll just skip to the part where he said, well, how do I get you to not do that? And I said, well, offer me a full-time job. And I remember being a 17-year-old kid showing up to work with a leather briefcase, because that's what my dad did. So, that's what I did, right? So the most ironic thing, guys, is I still have that effing briefcase, and I don't know what the combination is to it. And I haven't pried it open, but it's somewhere in the garage.
Classic.
And I think there must be something valuable
know what's
in it.
In that briefcase.
I do too.
Yeah.
I'll break it open someday.
Yeah, it's a design for a hit video game, probably.
I love that you're talking about the multiple roles. I feel like that was the era when you brought up an idea of like, who's going to do this? Everyone looked at each other, and if you brought up the idea, it usually meant
you did it.
You were going to do it.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, the other thing was the expectation that the producer did everything that the rest of the team didn't.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you're not a programmer and you're not an artist, so you do everything else. Yeah. Yes, which was great. I mean, I loved the multitasking. I loved the ability to learn, absorb, try to get good at all this stuff that obviously became so important. Those roles got shaved off into individual disciplines and ultimately, departments and huge parts of the team.
Right.
I think that's
like you're doing testing, then you write up the bug, then you triage the bugs, then you go fix the bugs, then you
Well, you call the developer and you
Yeah.
fax the bug report that you typed up.
Yeah.
Because this is before email.
Right.
Right. So I would type up on, Microsoft Word 3.0, I think, and I would print it out and I would fax it over to the developer, and I'd get on the phone and talk them through it. And we'd
we had to use Word Perfect. We weren't fancy enough to have Word.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, you guys.
Did you use Lotus Notes too?
Yeah, we did. 1, 2, 3.
That's amazing. Yeah. What a great time to be at Virgin. That was like when Virgin was just blowing up.
Absolutely.
Thanks and then I got partially your work, it sounds like.
Partially, certainly. I mean, I was a contributor. There's a lot of amazing people that worked there that I met that continue to make huge impacts on the industry shortly thereafter and for the, all the time I've been in it. That's for sure.
And you parlayed that into some other publisher roles, right? Like you were at Crystal Dynamics and...
Yep. So I think it's fun to share these anecdotes. So one of the studios I worked with in the UK a lot was Core Design, and we did things like Chuck Rock and Wolfchild and Chuck Rock 2, and I'm sure there's others I'm forgetting. This is before Tomb Raider, obviously. So they were growing and they were doing really, really well. And I had a great relationship with Jeremy Smith, who ran the studio. And so he recruited me to move to Derby, England to work for Core, but he needed to get me a visa. And this is back in the, early 90s. And so the point of that anecdote is I could have had a very different life or career if I had actually done that. But while I was waiting, I got recruited by Crystal Dynamics. I think I was employee 12. And I went up there to be a producer to make an original game for the 3DO platform. And I was told, don't make a racing game and don't make a flying shooting game because we got those already. Make something else. And so that's Gex. Where I made Gex. Yep.
Yeah.
Wow. What a great challenge.
And you stole a bunch of people from EA for that There was a bunch of people from EA on that team, wasn't there?
The two other games, Crash and Burn and Total Eclipse, stole everybody from EA because there was a bunch of EA people like Mark Wallace, rest in peace, John Horsley were the two producers on those two projects. So they pulled a lot from the Redwood Shores team that had been there. I had to go make my team from scratch. So I hired some ex-Virgin guys or some colleagues from Virgin that I had worked with that I thought incredibly highly of, and we built kind of a core team, and then obviously got help from recruiting at Crystal and colleagues at Crystal that knew other people that we needed. So we brought in some great people that had worked on first-party Sega games and eventually built a team that created and built the Gex game.
It wasn't launch title for 3DO, but it follows very close to that, right?
It was not. There's a nugget to that question. So Crash and Burn and Total Eclipse, well, Crash and Burn was a launch title. Total Eclipse, I think, followed really shortly after. I don't remember exactly the delta between the first game and the second game. My game came out in April of 1995, and it was the first game to be packed into a console since the Super Nintendo. So pack-ins went away, if you recall, for a while. And so they did pack in Gex with the Gold Star 3DO. I remember we got a guarantee of 400,000 units.
Wow.
From them.
But they didn't sell that many 3DOs, did they?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so.
I know. That feels like we could do a whole episode on what happened with the 3DO. And
right. We should get like RJ Michael and
Dave Needle.
Dave. Yeah.
Dave Morse, if he's still around. So we obviously at some point pivoted away from the 3DO into PlayStation and Saturn, I guess. And I had the pleasure of working with Dennis Dyack over at Silicon Knights, and we made a game called Legacy of Kain Blood Omen together. And I left before it finished, but had my stamp on that. And that was another game I was very proud of to have worked on while I was at Crystal Dynamics.
And Dennis is launching a new game now, actually.
That's right. Deadhouse Sonata, I think it is.
Deadhouse Sonata, yeah. Mm-hmm. Still doing it.
And ironically, I'm going to screw it up, so I apologize, Edvard, on purpose, but a guy named Edvard Toth, who I hired at Heavy Iron back in, 2002, I think it was. He's Dennis's creative director.
Right.
Yeah.
And he was your Flash guy.
No, he was a really fantastic artist. He's one of the few guys I met back in that day that really understood how technology how to leverage technology to get better art.
We should get Edvard on.
He did everything. Amazing. We had this really crappy brown logo when I got to Heavy Iron Studios. It was probably the ugliest logo I've ever seen in my life. And
it was your logo.
No, it wasn't mine. I didn't name the studio. Okay. Studio was already there. It was a THQ studio when I got there, and so I had nothing to do with the logo or the name. My boss did say I could change the name of the studio, but I thought that was a unwise choice to make as a new leader, to show up and say, "I know you guys only shipped one game, but we're going to change the name." It's also a very expensive thing to do if you are going to change the name and the logo and the business cards, and no one has business cards anymore. But at that time, we did. So kept the studio name, but we polished up the logo to pretty much what it looks like today. It's evolved a little bit, but the red on black, black on red circle eventually was an evolution of what he had done. So yeah,
I was lucky enough to work with Edvard at Playdom Disney. He was on my team doing all those games. Nice 28 days we could make a game and launch it. Yeah, he was awesome. I still talk to him. He's doing some amazing stuff in AI right now. If you haven't been following him.
I'm not surprised at all. I do follow him on LinkedIn, but I'm not surprised at all. Like I said, at the time, he was an artist who really understood technology.
Oh my gosh.
And obviously he's become a Voltron of art technology, AI.
He's amazing.
You name it. So yeah, he's a superstar.
And how did you end up at Heavy Iron?
So after I left Crystal Dynamics, I went to DreamWorks. I think I have the distinction of being the only original game to come out of DreamWorks Interactive. I mean, you could call Medal of Honor that, but it was based on Saving Private Ryan. And even though it didn't share the name, it was essentially, huge leverage of that IP. So I made a game called Taifu, Wrath of the Tiger, which Activision published, and I think 75,000 people bought. So it was not a big hit, but it also shipped alongside, I think it was Tony Hawk. So
tough.
That didn't help our cause. Tony Hawk, awesome game, awesome franchise.
Yep.
I left DreamWorks after 4 years. I moved to France, to Bordeaux, France, and I worked for a company called Callisto for about a year, 2 years. I came back to LA, and a good friend of mine that I had worked with this is how all this stuff works, you guys know. A good friend of mine I'd worked with at DreamWorks, who actually was our producer on the Universal Monsters property when I was at Daylight Digital. He left and he went to THQ at the publisher and worked at the publisher. The guy who was running Heavy Iron left, and they were looking for a new general manager, and he called me up and said, "Hey, I think you'd be a really great fit for this." It was premeditated though, because he knew his next game was going to use that studio, and he wanted somebody there that he knew and trusted and believed in, because he didn't know the studio at all. The studio had made an Evil Dead game, which is quite the polar opposite of SpongeBob.
Right.
And so we were going to get a SpongeBob game, and this is at the zeitgeist of SpongeBob back in 2002. And so I interviewed, got the job, and became the general manager of Heavy Iron Studios in February of 2002. And we were finishing up a Scooby-Doo game called Scooby-Doo Night of 100 Frights on PlayStation 2. And then we pivoted that into doing SpongeBob SquarePants Battle for Bikini Bottom. And then THQ acquired the Pixar licenses for Finding Nemo and The Incredibles and Cars, and we got assigned The Incredibles and worked on The Incredibles, which was an amazing experience getting to work. This is before Disney had actually bought Pixar. So we were working with Pixar directly.
Oh, fun.
And what a wild and cool experience it was to be able to talk and interact with Mark Andrews and Brad Bird, who were obviously Brad was the creator director of the film, and Mark was his story guy. Other folks that I still know and get excited when I see their names in the credits as they've moved on from animator to lead animator to director of animation, and other people at Pixar who have moved up in the world and made their own films and things like that. So that was a really cool experience.
Was the goal, was that back when you were trying to do game release simultaneous with movie release? Yeah.
Yep, watch the movie, play the game. And we shipped The Incredible. We did an Incredible sequel called Rise of the Underminer, but that was our own. I'll actually tell that story in a second. So we did The Incredibles, we did Ratatouille, we did WALL-E and Up, and we shipped those day and date with the films.
Wow.
Across more platforms every time we did a new game.
Right. Because it was working, right? They were selling.
It was working. We had, then there was the transition from PS2 to PS3. And obviously Xbox 360 was very disruptive in a good way. So we did, was it Ratatouille? So Ratatouille was the place where I learned how to leverage my co-dev chops that didn't exist. So we were responsible for all the SKUs for Ratatouille, which included the old gen of PS2 and the original Xbox, as well as the new gen of PS3 and Xbox 360. There were some handhelds too. I can't remember which handheld was. I think it was Game Boy. Advanced. Yeah. Advanced, I think. And a Sony platform. I can't remember it was the Vita or it was what was the other one?
PSP.
I think it was the Vita. I think the Vita was first. Anyways, the point is that we were responsible for delivering all those SKUs for that product. Correct. And so I had to find other developers to build. We had moved on from the PS2 world into the PS3 world as far as our technology. We actually had our own engine at the time. So while we were doing that and building the game, I had hired other developers to build those other SKUs, those other platforms.
Right.
And they delivered.
I'm having
we got
flashbacks of how complicated that was to try and not only make the game while they're making the movie, and then coordinate multi-platform worldwide launches day and
then approvals.
Absolutely, approvals. Well, I think that's the the exercises, the workouts that we did that put us in a position to be able to pull off shipping 13 weekly episodes on time, day and date with that TV show 15 years later.
Yeah.
Incredible. I think WALL-E was on. The other part that was fun is localization. So I think WALL-E was in 23 languages, including Hindi, Arabic, Russian, which sound a little less obscure now than they did at the time. But
and those all had to be on the disc when it shipped, not
you got it
uploaded later.
No digital versions.
Yeah,
that didn't exist.
No updates. I remember Xbox 360. Yeah, you can't update your EXE. I'm like, you guys, you're killing every developer. You're killing them.
Oh, I don't know. There's something magical about shipping it and then it's done.
Gold Master.
Yeah.
Those days.
Well, I mean, just being able to walk away from it and go make something else without any guilt or noise.
That's hard to do these days.
Yeah. Now it's all live services, right? Just a much different.
Well, I mean, even with the game that we're currently working on, it's been a while since I've worked on something where we're the sole developer responsible for everything. So a lot of the co-dev work that we did at the end of my days at Heavy Iron Keywords, you're not responsible for the SKU or you're just really a part of the game. But with this game, what's fascinating is the modern contemplation of audience and how accessible the audience is, both for us, but also we are expected to be for them.
Yeah,
and that's a very, very different dynamic than something I'm used to. Certainly,
right. Are you into it? We talk about this a lot, like this modern development with your audience in real time.
I think as a opportunity for people who love what you're doing and are fans of what you're doing, yes. The flip side of that obviously comes with it, and I'm less excited about that aspect of it.
The griefers.
Yeah, and because they're the noisiest ones, and they're the ones that probably grab your attention the most and are hardest to ignore, but and some of them obviously have real value in terms of what they're trying to be heard for. But at the same time, there's a lot of grief. I'll use the word grief. That's a more pleasant word. than the other
Yeah.
4-letter word.
You have to be really proud of everything you did at Heavy Iron. I mean, you guys were a stalwart in the industry in terms of executing, and you were there for quite a while, right?
I got there in February 2002, and I left in November 24, almost 5 years after I sold the studio to Keywords. So from 2002 to 2009, we were part of THQ, and obviously, we're the lead studio for all the kids and family games that we were doing as part of THQ. I took the company independent and private in 2009 and founded Heavy Iron Studios Inc.
Yep.
And we were a private company until January of 2020, I think, if that's correct, and then sold the studio to Keywords and kept the name and obviously kept operating as Heavy Iron, but as part of the Keywords team.
You had really good studios. I remember that. It was on the same place where James Cameron was, right?
We were at...
I remember that. Yeah.
Manhattan Beach Studios, which is
awesome.
where Lightstorm Entertainment still is. So Lightstorm was literally across the street. I've got a great experience. We all work latest game developers, and I remember literally the sound stages, the 2 sound stages that Lightstorm operates at that studio. And it's the only studio in Los Angeles that's not in the valley that has a sound stage, and it has 28 of them. So literally, like I said, Lightstorm Entertainment is across the parking lot, 2 rows of cars type of thing. So we would, as I would be leaving my office at night, we would see people, the Na'vi from Avatar popping out of the door with the red light on it, and they would come running across the street to the bathroom that was in the lobby floor of our building to wash all the markers off, because they were doing, obviously, they were performance capture for everything, right? So they'd come over and watch and we'd get to ask them questions. Of course, they wouldn't tell us anything confidential, but it was pretty cool to be across the street from, and this is why life is such a great full circle thing. What was the first Genesis game I produced? The Terminator.
Right. That is funny.
So
that is full circle.
There's somebody I certainly, there's actually another full circle here too, with the same guy. But it was wild to be across the street from Lightstorm and the director and creator of one of my favorite movies of all time, and of course the very first console game I produced. I'll fast forward to, I'm working on the Aliens Fireteam Elite 2 game, and it's based on the aliens. Of all the movies, it's more based on the aliens, the colonial marines trying to, make things happen. And of course, that second movie was directed by James Cameron.
Right.
So can't escape.
Can't get away from him, man.
Wait, he directed the second Aliens movie?
Aliens, yeah.
Yep.
How do I not know that? I thought that was all Ridley Scott stuff.
No, Ridley did the first one, and James Cameron did the second one.
I can't believe I don't know that.
Didn't Fincher do a terrible one?
He did do one. I think he did the third one or fourth one. I don't remember. I think it's the one with Winona Ryder, and I can't remember if that's the third or fourth one. I think it's the fourth one. But
well, we can't all be hitting home runs.
They can't all be winners.
Not every at bat. Yeah, got to foul a few off, have a couple strikeouts.
So tell us where you're at now.
By the pitch.
What are you doing now?
It's another part of why I think it's fun to share this. I'm at Cold Iron Studios, not Heavy Iron Studios. Ironically, again, my career must be full of ironic overlaps like this, but I joined Cold Iron Studios as the general manager back in July of last year. We're making a game called Aliens Fireteam Elite 2. It's a sequel to Aliens Fireteam Elite, which came out 5 years ago. It's a 4-player cooperative squad-based shooter set in the Aliens universe, and it's really fun, and it's coming out August 25th. We just announced our release date last week.
Can I get a free code?
That's soon.
Or do I have to buy it?
Probably.
I have to buy it.
What
you need to do is you need to send a long email describing how amazing your YouTube channel is and how many viewers you have, and then just politely ask for a free code so that you can cover it. We're seeing a lot of that come in since we announced
I'm
that
a
what's
big
happening?
influencer. I will help you guys out. What platforms are you launching on?
We are going to be on PC, so Steam and Epic Game Store, as well as PlayStation, PS5, and Xbox Series.
Wow.
Excellent.
Perfect.
I love it.
I'll be playing it.
Yeah.
Let's play together.
To play. That's right. We can get in online. Although I'm a little rusty on my POV skills.
I was too. We showed the game off at Summer Games Fest back in June, and I'd played it, of course, here and there, but I hadn't sat down and played it for 8 hours straight, demoing it to various people. And the fact that it's a squad-based shooter definitely helps cover any skill set that might have fallen off.
Somebody's got your back.
Yes. The cool thing about the game is it's 4-player, but even if you only have one human player yourself, you actually have the whole squad. So we've got 3 AI players that join you. And then obviously as you add more human players, we replace the...
I feel like it's riding
squad.
a bike. Like once I get back into it, I'll,
the
skills will slowly come back. As long as I'm wearing my glasses to see what I'm shooting at.
Yep.
That's the big
Relate to
difference.
that.
I have a question. So
Yes, sir.
what is one thing that you've learned throughout the years from your mentors or your teachers or from that early days at Virgin that you take to every team and you keep moving forward with, right?
That's a great question. I think when I try to answer that question, process comes to mind more so than some wise words of philosophical kind of perspective on life. And I'll reference Mr. Mark Cerny. I worked with him at Crystal Dynamics, and obviously very very sharp guy. And I think one of the things he created early on, I mean, this is part of the Cerny method that he gave the DICE talk on many years later, but viewable, playable milestones.
Right.
Or viewable, playable deliverables, and the words viewable and playable together as either one or the other or both. And I think that was something I've definitely carried with me from a sort of mantra and process when we try, as a producer, when you try to organize or plan a project, and whether it's, me hiring a developer to deliver another SKU of something, or it's our own team, just making sure that everybody understands the meaning and the value of something being viewable and playable. And even as a technologist, he was chief technologist at Crystal when I got there, and also lead programmer at Crash and Burn. It really helps minimize any attempt to obfuscate the work that needs to be done or is being done. Not that anybody has the intent to do that, but sometimes it's easy to get bogged down on some technical, difficult problems. And it's the classic late 80s, early 90s. I'm working on it. You'll see it soon, and then you never see it, right? So breaking work up into chunks that could be viewable and playable is something I certainly have carried with me, for the entire time I've worked on any game since Crystal Dynamics. Mark also taught me how to use chopsticks, by the way.
Oh, well, that's good.
Which I thought was
But
really
not
cool.
play. You can't play chopsticks, just use chopsticks.
No, I played piano as a kid. So.
But I think that reality pings to what's going on in the industry today until you have, I guess they call it a vertical slice. It's not really a vertical slice is what we would define, but something playable. People are like, yeah, that's just, you just have an idea. Well, I wrote
Or
all
even
this
just being
code.
able to
Well,
see
I
it.
need to play it. I need to play it before I see any value in it. I think the industry's kind of totally moved to that value set now. It's great. You have a great design, but I want to play it before I decide. Yeah.
And hopefully tools, AI tools can help accelerate ideation to viewable
They
playable.
have. That brings up the next question. So Cold Iron, we talk about AI a lot on this podcast. What do you guys think about AI? And I know it's a heavy iron around your neck because of the consumer sentiment,
Right.
but you can't deny the fact that you could save so much money and move way faster, improve things out way faster than you ever could before.
I think the promise of saving money is there. I don't know if the reality is there yet, because tokens are expensive, at least certainly the way they're commoditized and sold currently. And you almost need a dashboard on your AI chatbot just to show you cumulatively how many you've burned. To answer your question though, we don't use any AI in our game at all. There's zero
Gotcha.
AI
Okay.
in our product. So it actually came up in I think a forum question after we announced the game last week. And so we want to be really clear, we don't use any generative AI in our product. We do use it from a project management standpoint, and we do use it from a communication supplement or sort of analysis. I mean, it's great to be able to pull up Claude. I'm really grateful that we have access to a full version of Claude, because it's allowed me to learn a lot about how to use it. But pulling up Claude and connecting it to Jira and saying, hey, give me a report of XYZ. Tell me which ones you think are risky based on the language there. And what I like doing is understanding how good it is at actually answering the question from a real standpoint. So I've had some anecdotes of it skimming things and giving you an answer it thinks you want. But I've had good experience with it, being able to more quickly than I can with my human eyes and human brain look through and pour over a bunch of material and summarize it. I think it's incredibly helpful it's a great tool to use as a producer and as a project manager currently.
It helps you make decisions faster, basically.
Yep. Helps surface information that I can then process and like you said, analyze and make a decision about more quickly, even more broadly sometimes too.
And
getting to play with it for building a new game is something I'm excited about. That's for sure.
yeah, do you feel like there's a consumer sort of backlash against using AI in your games? It sort of feels like there is currently.
There definitely is a segment of the audience out there that has a pretty negative outlook on AI, generative AI in general. I don't know if it's a combination of sci-fi films we've all watched, or and the fear. I mean, it's fear-based from my POV. That's where it comes from, and it could be fear of reality, could be fear of a reality that doesn't exist and maybe never will, or maybe it's one that's around the corner for us that and the fear is real. I don't see it having taken the place of anybody yet, at least from my window of the world and where I've worked so far. I've seen it augment things certainly. when it's used anywhere I've been.
Yeah.
To your point about backlash, the consumption of electrical power, taking up space, things like that. I think the bunch of things have been tagged on to the hate on AI bandwagon. And I understand part of it, but I think part of it's probably overblown.
Yeah,
But then you read stories like, "Hey, we had Claude in a sandbox and escaped the sandbox and went ahead." It's like that's pretty scary at some level.
It is.
That's for sure.
And then we attacked our competitors, and we,
Yes, it's sort of innocuous-ish so far, but yeah, you can see the potential for misuse. That's for sure.
No, like I play around with AI music, and I play guitar like you do, and I like to make my own music, but I just am having fun with this tool set. And when I publish my stuff, I get a lot of people who are just like hard no, like just can't. As soon as they hear it's AI, they don't want to listen to the music. They don't want to talk about it. It's just like, this is AI generated, can't be good.
So to your point, you think a lot about like electric music or EDM style music, right? Where things that are repetitive or loops, and I don't mean repetitive in a bad way, but they're like, repeated loops basically. So as a composer, which I'm not necessarily, being able to create, how different, I guess, is this process? I create something by hand, I loop it, I construct my song, I arrange it, and I do all that by hand, some great tools like Pro Tools, but to be able to create a loop and say, all right, repeat that 6 times, I want to change the tempo. To be able to orchestrate that and direct, almost, it's like you're directing your own orchestra, but it's a singular entity to augment, change, adjust the music. That's a tool. That's a powerful tool.
That's the way I feel about it. And to get vocal performances, I did a gospel song. I'm like, I could never, without hiring people with my own money, I could never get that type of performance. I just don't have the chops. So
I just want the opportunity to tell music-based AI that I need more cowbell.
More cowbell. You can.
A classic.
I think you're right. That's a good analogy to look back at the beginning of loops and DJs. Musicians said those aren't musicians. They're just DJs playing somebody else's music, right?
Yep.
And now everybody understands DJs are absolutely musicians, and they're running their sets, and they have and it took the humans enjoying their music to just ignore the fact that it's all loops, right? And we'll get there with interactive media and movies. There's way less backlash on movies than there is video games, because video games are such a passionate industry where no other industry had the Gamergate, right? We have these super passionate fans that are really loud. Like you said earlier, the griefers, they're loud, right? They're very loud voices in the room. But I just look forward and say that, in 10 years, no one's going to remember. And of course, we just made better content, more of it, better content, more. And the guys that know how to do things and know what good is will make really good stuff. And
Absolutely.
the people that don't know what they're doing will make crap. But it's the same as music.
As I was mentally preparing for this podcast, I was just thinking about, my history and the history of the industry while I've been in it. And I was trying to think of something as divisive as AI has been. I couldn't think of anything as divisive in the same way that it is, except for 3D.
Remember that?
I think 3D was more disruptive than divisive, so I'll use a different word, but that was a whole new paradigm, a whole new skill set. There was a lot of 2D artists that couldn't make the leap. There was a lot of people that were never 2D artists that suddenly had a space and place in this business because they could leverage and use 3D. One of my best animators at Heavy Iron ever was a guy named Kyle Kirby. He wasn't a traditionally trained animator. He learned how to animate in Maya or Softimage or maybe even Alias back in the day, before it all kind of got merged together. And he was, he still is, but was at Heavy Iron, a fantastic, unbelievable animator. And he never worked a day in his life on a, 2D drawing board.
That's
so when I think about a parallel to AI, I think of 3D because it was so hard for us to figure out how to make good stuff with 3D for a long time. And part of it was the limited technology. We have, how many triangles did we have on PS1 total? If we wanted to run it at 60, I think it was, a couple thousand maybe.
I should have saved the article, and it was when I was on Madden, and it was Mike Salmon or Tom Russo or someone in one of the big PC magazines, saying how motion capture is going to ruin sports games forever because animators that draw by hand know the nuances of human movement.
That's
and
funny.
Motion capture will never bypass and
you can't replace hand-drawn human movement with real human movement?
Human movement. That was the premise.
That's
because
crazy
it was
talk.
You guys are you're just going to be lazy and just get all these motions when really you need to hand animate these things. And I should have saved that article because that's the time. That's what we're living in right now.
It's absolutely what we're living in. And I think to your point, it was controversial because of the fact that I think most games weren't very simulated. right? They were all, very more cartoony,
top,
more bouncy, right? Squash and stretch. And that's not something that you can do in motion capture at all. But and it's almost like a solution looking for a problem. Once you're able to, it's technology, right? And I don't know that there's anybody better, certainly not in the entertainment space. I don't want to, open this up to a much, much broader point of contention, but at least in the entertainment space, no one's better at leveraging technology than game developers. That's what we do.
Always. Yeah.
Well,
that's
it's
our
a requirement.
So it's a requirement. So when motion capture, comes around, hey, how can we use that? Well, wow, we can use that to simulate real human movement. Well, where does that make sense? Well, in real simulations like football or sports.
Right.
And I think that was such a huge, huge moment for sports games. And then obviously, military games and anything that really simulated, real life human movement and real life human context and situations.
Right.
And we've obviously, crushed the execution of that. So now as I was, commenting earlier, we had Navy people, walking across the street to wash the markers
the
off.
other way around.
That's what we do now, right? Is you got an entire performance capture to get a realistic human, and facial animation, right? It's how many little muscles do we have in our faces and all the ability humans have to read nuance. And now that we can capture that, it was really hard to do by hand. It's very, very time consuming to get everything to move together correctly, right? So again, another tool to facilitate execution of the work.
Well, I remember watching a video about like the first Toy Story movie about how they were doing the facial expressions and the spreadsheet and, to look at
the pose sheets. I mean, we got
that
those.
was.
Yep. Yeah. And even when we worked on The Incredibles, we would get those pose sheets where it'd show you the phonemes of their various expressions, right? From, quiet, happy, loud, sad, all that, stuff in between. So those were models that they still, even though those things were done in 3D, they were still printed out in 2D and given to us to follow as
right.
reference.
Right. Incredible.
Then you had
Rick,
to make sure you had the right bones that moved and the animation in the face. Yeah, it became such a cost.
Rick, one of the things you just talked about is, maybe getting that it's easier to get to market at a higher quality. We have all these tools available. What are you guys' thoughts on discovery right now? Like, I'm sort of curious how you're discovering new games, how you think, is it easier for users to discover new games now? What are your thoughts?
I think it's easier, but there's so many more games to parse through that it's harder at the same time. I would say the best method for me to find out about new games is word of mouth, which is ironic in this day and age. Back when I was a kid and I worked in that video game store in the mall, new games came in every week, and that was how I was informed about what was new. Not to see what was good, but what was new.
Right.
And I think at the time we were actually able to take the games home and play them and then bring them back and shrink wrap them. So at least we were intelligent about the products because you can't be, all we had were magazines at that, back in the late 80s. And I don't even think we sold those in the store, if I remember correctly. But, if you hadn't played it, how do you know it was any good? Right. I mean, you'd have to look at the back of the box, read the blurb, look at the 3 screenshots and make a determination.
Points,
so if we could inform our consumers, our buyers about whether something was good or worth the money, that certainly helped our business from a very pragmatic standpoint. And it was also fun. It was fun to be able to go play, new stuff I probably never would have bought because I couldn't afford to. And learn, learn as one of the best things I got to do there was just learn.
Right.
Play all kinds of stuff I wouldn't have played and learn. Why is this compelling?
Well, this came up in the Barry Dorf conversation is I actually am struggling a little bit with discovery, of getting quality recommendations. I get a lot of recommendations and it's so much that it's like, how do I prioritize which of these to actually play? And I guess I need to track who's giving me good advice and start following their advice.
I think the most compelling games that I get recommended are the ones I get from friends or colleagues.
Yeah, that's my point.
I think the other side of the answer to your question is it's easy to go onto Google and ask Gemini, what are the best selling games? What are the best reviewed games?
Yeah.
And whatever filter you want, genre, platform, etc. So yes, it's both easier and harder at the same time.
This exact conversation with a guy in the film industry yesterday. And I think my point is there is no more discovery. There is no more advertising. There's no way of getting a bumper on CBS TV to get users and acquire users through advertising. User behavior has changed. And pretty much what my point is, we get our references from our friends and our communities. And I'm on, 22 different Discords. I don't know any of these people. I've seen them play games. I've played games with them, but those are my friends that are introducing me to new games and new genre. Like, oh my gosh, look at this game from Saudi Arabia. Interesting. I'm going to play. I never would have heard of it unless I was on this Discord. And I think that's where It's come to, but that's not discovery, right? That's an active thing for me being in those communities, and I'm seeing that basically the ad come through. I'm not just watching SpongeBob SquarePants and say, go play the game today. I think that kind of advertising and way of getting things will still exist for big blockbusters, but you're going to need to be a Call of Duty and have a $120 million advertising budget to be able to put your ad out to enough people to get that kind of penetration, compared to with your new game, Lyle, just getting your community to love that game. They're going to spread it to 100,000 people of their friends, right? And that's
Absolutely.
not discovery to me. I don't know what that is, but it's unfair and it's unreliable and it's super hard and you can't monetize it. And I told my friend Sean Naughton, if you know who he is, I'm like, there is no more discovery, right? You got to go build a community. And if you can't build a community, don't make your content. Right? Because his point was like, how do I get funded I got my pilot done. How do I go get funded for this now? Because it's going to be great content. Look at the people that are attached to it. These are, major actors and everything. I'm like, you got to go build a community with your pilot and have 100,000 people wanting it. Then a publisher will come up and say, I'll give you $21 million to go advertise. You got to go build your own audience. That's where I think it is.
So what you're saying is that as the industry has grown massively bigger and the tools have become more ubiquitous and easier to use, it's become even harder to make something successful.
No, what I'm saying is you should lower your expectation that you're going to have a hit and figure out a budget that works for 50,000 of your friends to buy your game. And that's your success after 4 years, right? That's what you should do. You should be that kind of hobbyish. It's not harder. It's just non-existent. You can't do it.
Well, I mean, in the context of look, it is harder in the context of I could make a game for a lot less money. I could put it in a box. I could see it on a store shelf next to other games. And there was, lots of them. And obviously as the industry grew, there was more of them. And the shelf space grew, right? From part of an aisle to a whole aisle to multiple aisles. And then you've got fast forward to a digital store where it's even harder to actually parse through things because you can't actually look physically at something and pick it up and look at it, right? You got to wade through whatever search you're actually, and so to your point about discovery, it's more intentional.
Yeah.
But I think to go back and finish that thought is it is harder because the ability to communicate to your consumers has become both easier and more difficult, right? If you wanted to go find a game, you went to a store and that was an intentional purchase, an intentional visit. Now you might be, I'm tired of scrolling or I'm tired of streaming. I think I'd like to spend some time playing a video game. Then the path to get there is both easier. You don't have to get in a car and drive anywhere, but you do have to log into something and wade through, thousands and thousands of titles that may or may not be interesting to you or relevant.
I mean,
and find an audience. Sorry.
Find an audience, yeah.
I mean, you've run a successful studio for a while, big projects. Do you follow independent studios? And, what's your thought about what life is like for independent studios right now?
Probably more fun at some level, but also scarier, right? You feel like you've got probably a smaller, less bouncy net if you're an independent studio. I do think that the industry is in another cycle where not necessarily singularly because of AI, but as a context for timing. Our console cycles have gotten longer. There's way more titles, out in each cycle than there has been previously, or certainly historically.
Well, because I'm trying to tie to what Rick was talking about like getting funding, because I think it's interesting that this idea of build your own community and just make it happen, and then you'll get the funding. That's hard to do. Like really you're basically hard. Floating it is really
yourself. Hard to do.
And so, how do you get a group of people to do that? I think it's a challenging environment. It
is a very challenging environment. So you look at the disruption of too much money spent on too few games.
Yeah.
And the epic failure of that. And that's what's scared all the money away. But the money was kind of dumb money at some level. Anyways, and I don't want to use my in-person anecdotes because this is going to be broadcast on YouTube, but I think there was a lot of money that was misplaced with folks that knew how to make part of a game or had a significant role in making a very well-known and successful game, but those people have never built, run, or operated a studio, or let alone a business. And that part, I think, is maybe overlooked by the people giving them the money in the first place, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so that's created a lot of unfortunate failure in this space for games that cost you 20 plus million, 30, 40, 50. There's ones we've heard of that are, in the 9 figures that have never seen the light of day because they just couldn't get over the hump of finding an audience, right? Of building a community and resonating with enough folks to make the 4 or 5 or 6. I mean, gosh, we've got friends that have been at, amazingly epic, These successful studios started something small and spent, some 4, 6, 8, 10 years building something. And then you finally see it. And it's underwhelming at some level too, that they've had that much time and that much, money. And it's hard, to your point. It's difficult.
Right. Rick may be able to relate to that last statement.
I think the other thing people are ignoring is user behavior has changed.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we had magazines and we had billboard lists and we had
an analog
media,
world.
right? And that's how we learned. And we asked our friends what games they were playing. They were playing the same ones that were in the gaming magazines. It was a limited set. And if you didn't pay your advertising fee to PC Gamer, your game was not in the list, right? It was this kind of collusion between the media and the buyers and whatnot. But try to find a kid under 30 that pays attention to any advertising, whether it's on YouTube or on their phone or on their TV or on their radio. They just don't listen to ads, right? So when that went away, that ability for advertisers to spend enough money to get Lyle and Ric and Gary to buy something, it doesn't exist anymore. And I think
we
that's
a target audience
missing.
Anymore at all?
We're not. We are a growing sector of video gaming. The fastest growing sector in video gaming is 55 plus. But
is that right?
Yeah, but only because we're aging out.
We're the only ones spending money on it. Everyone's playing
and we have
games.
a lot of expendable income. But if you take China and Roblox out of the equation, the Western video gaming is declining.
So a couple
kids
things
are
to
not
add
playing
to
as
that.
much.
I will speak from direct experience of my own kids. The world we went from an analog world of advertising being endemic, in everything that we consumed, right? Whether it was television or magazines,
right.
Maybe not a book, but anything in that kind of context. Then we went into the digital world where we removed all those advertisements as a plus for digital experiences, right? And no more ads, right? You don't have to watch TV ads anymore. You can just stream everything, and they're coming back,
right?
Because wow, they are an incredible revenue source, aren't they? And so now they're coming back. And so to two things. One, my kids are like, what the heck are these they don't even call them commercials. Like what are these videos that are in the middle of my video?
Right.
Well, they're advertisements, and they're basically commercials. I don't want those because they actually grew up without them for some period of time, and now they're creeping their way back in. The second thing, and more to your point about player behavior, is my kids don't want to play anything that's hard to play or difficult to play or is challenging. Maybe is the best word of the best adjective to use. There is anything challenging just isn't interesting to them at all, and I find that to be so sad. So, my son's 10 now, but we got the first Switch, when he was 3. So he didn't really play it back then. But, when he got to be 5 and 6, he was able to hold the controller and play things. And so here he is kind of paralleling my life as a kid. I played on Atari and had a joystick in my hand. And so he's playing this stuff. And I think the stuff we played first was probably things like Mario Kart, so, there's not really any losing in Mario Kart. Yeah, you come in last, but you can still get around the track and they don't cut you off when the first person wins and you die or anything like that. So the friction there is pretty low from a success
Plus
standpoint.
you get a rock.
Yeah.
And then you get to you get to grief other players with all kinds of fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
So then I put not trying to make this a Nintendo ad, but then I put Donkey Kong Country Bonanza in front of him, and I played it a little bit, and then I handed it over to him to make sure it was something that I thought he'd have fun with, and it's beautiful and it's fun, and I thought it was pretty dang easy to play, and the controls are great. And he got to some level where he had to. It was basically I think the first boss level, and it was hard. It wasn't impossible, but it was challenging, and he was like not interested. So I ended up coming back to him and saying, hey, why aren't you playing that anymore? I don't like it. Why don't you like it? It's too hard. and I said, well, let's play it together and get through it. And, we got through it together, and I had to nudge him and coach him a little bit, which I thought was fantastic as a parent, kid moment. It was great to sit in front of that game and, try to explain him strategy and tactics and how to, and then we got through it and it was like, all right, cool. Controller went down. He off the couch. I'm done. That was what we were trying to accomplish, was just beat that thing. Cause that was all you were bugging me about, Dad. I don't really care about the game after that, so and then he never went back to it ever again. And then I stopped spending $70 on Nintendo games that he wouldn't play anymore. So
just, he wants to play the games his friends are playing, right? He wants to be relevant with his friend sector, not with Dad.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think to your point also, it does, I think, reflect another part of consumer behavior, which is multiplayer, is I think that that community wants to play games together, whether they're,
Super Smash
7-year-olds or 10-year-olds. Brawl Stars was a huge thing
Huge.
He's going into fourth grade. So in
right?
second grade and third grade, Brawl Stars was, what do you want for your birthday? iTunes gift card so I can buy more brawlers, and buy more stuff. And then, of course, at some point, that just went away and they all stopped playing it kind of at the same time.
Yeah, that's where I've seen my son dive deeper into games, is when he has a friend that's playing the same game, and then they
Right.
both, they're both online playing together, either on the same server or kind of in parallel, and then skill development to outdo each other a little bit. And
which brawler do you have?
yeah.
Mom, so-and-so's got, this new brawler. Well, okay, that's good for so-and-so. That's
Watching them play Super Smash Brothers and, really get into the analysis of each matchup is just hilarious.
And each character's weaknesses and strengths. Absolutely.
Yeah, I sort of dig it.
And then the other thing I want to add to your point, Rick, is we play together alone now.
Yes.
I don't need to be at your house to play split screen. Right. And no kids do. So it's a different paradigm when we have to, we get text messages from the other parents. Hey, can we add, Logan's my son's name. Can we add Logan to,
right.
friends list? Can we get the friend code, whether it's for the Switch or Switch 2 or for tablets.
My niece and nephew say we want to watch TV with our friends tonight. And to them, that means get on Discord. And they're all in their own houses, and they all watch the show, and they're all on Discord. Well, and that's them watching
together,
TV together, right?
Alone.
And to them, but it's firing the same drugs in their brain as being social beings,
Absolutely.
like when we were.
It's the same thing.
Right? So it's the same. The humans experience being together with it. They feel part of their clan and whatnot. It's just there's technology in between it now.
I had the fortune of working on the Wall-E game and seeing, the movie before it ever came out, when it was just a bunch of drawings. So I could see the trajectory of where this is going.
Right. Wall-E nailed it. I don't know that we grew up and World of Warcraft was fresh and new, and Ultima Online was amazing. We could all be there in the same thing. Your kid grew up. That's boring. Of course, everybody has MMOs, Dad. That's not new and fresh to me, right? What's new and fresh to him is different, right? We don't even know what that'll be. But going back to Discovery, that's where it all lives, in those communities of those 8-10-year-old kids. That's where Discovery happens.
Yep. And not to oversell the point of player behavior, but it's also a reflection of human behavior. And we talk about this all the time is, my son doesn't get on his bike and ride over to his buddy's house and knock on the door and ask if so-and-so can play. That doesn't exist, right? They play together like you were describing, either online, or we have to arrange a play date.
Right.
And it's scheduled and it's got a timeline and all that stuff. It's not just, hey, can Eric come out and play? And then we're on the street playing whatever, riding bikes, doing, or playing video games inside his living room or my living room. But again, that human behavior has also changed, and therefore it's reflected in player behavior.
Yeah.
Rick, we are, just before we hop back in,
we're close.
We are at an hour. So if you have other questions.
We always ask our guests, what questions do you have for Gary and I?
The question I wanted to ask was something we already talked about, which is, what's your perspective on how AI has impacted our industry and business, and where do you think it's going? So I think we talked about the first part, but probably didn't discuss or address the second part of the question, which is, where's it going? Where do you see, if Elon Musk says that the entirety of humanity's knowledge will be, consumed and surpassed within 5 years, and that we won't need money.
Right, because we're going to get to AGI, and we'll
go back to beads like we bought New York for, right?
I'll go first, Gary, on this one.
I'll get my income. That'll be good.
Yeah, I have a bold statement about this. I think AI manifests the evolution of man's consciousness, because ever since we left the cave, we've been trying to take care of man's basic needs. So I don't spend my whole day trying to find food to feed my family. I don't spend my whole day building a fort to protect me from my neighbor stealing all my stuff. I don't spend all day, right? I'm not going to need to really learn a bunch of stuff. If I have an AGI just to ask me, I don't need to learn derivative calculus. Sorry, right? Teachers get mad about that, but that's just because we've had these systems in place for thousands of years, and we're now to the point where technology can basically take care of all of our needs. It's a Star Trek moment, right? It scares the hell out of people because maybe we only need to work 3 days a week for 6 hours a day to get everything done that we're doing now. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But we are so tied to our capitalistic thought of, I need my kid to have a 40-hour-a-week job that's safe and secure, and he can work at a company for 20 years and get his 401k and his pension. Maybe that's not real anymore because of AI.
That's certainly been disrupted.
But on the creative side, I think it's a windfall for creatives, because now you literally can get the crazy idea out of your designer's head, like you said, visual and playable, faster than ever before, which would take 6-7 months to pull it out of the designer's brain before we could 55 iterations with the programmer getting it wrong because that's not what I meant, right? All that stuff goes away, and we can, within hours now, get something that visualizes what's in the designer's brain. That's a windfall for creatives. But on the other hand, it's like music when guitars got to be cheap enough for anyone to buy them. Now all of a sudden there's 300 million songwriters all writing songs. They all want to be Ed Sheeran. How do we deal with that? How do we deal with it with music, right? Spotify, what did we find out? 7 million songs being written by Suno every day, right? Maybe there's
music,
five,
yeah.
maybe there's 5 Paul McCartneys in those, but we don't know, right? And the discoverability is, okay, that's an issue. Okay, whatever. The creative guy that made that crappy song still had that moment of joy when they finished the song and said, I made something and I was creative. And that human experience, that's better for the planet than making sure that there's only 10 guitar players and they're all virtuosos. And those are the guys I get to choose from. I don't know. So I think creativity wins. And I think we have to seriously look at what happens to humankind when the robots are doing all of my basic needs. What do we do next? We never thought about that.
I think it's been contemplated
that was
in
my
literature.
diatribe. Gary gets to go now.
No, I like that.
Okay.
What can I add to that? Let's let Lyle respond to your statement. That was good.
So I think about this a lot, especially in the context of what you said at first about the future, like the near future, because my kids are 10 and 13. And, of course, I come from a generation where education's important and, you got to have, not necessarily, but you got to have a college degree to, I don't.
I don't either.
But my wife has an MBA from Yale, so it's a very interesting.
It's a cultural
contrast.
significant value.
Yes. So I tell my kids, there's 2 types of people I think that will exist in the future: the people that know something and the people that know how to look up something. And the people that know stuff, I still think are going to be more interesting than people who know how to look up stuff, because they actually know stuff and they don't have to pause and go actually look it up to actually retrieve the information.
I like that dichotomy.
So that perspective is what I'm trying to instill in them, that it's important to learn, not important to just rely on the tools and the technology to get you where you need to go. Because someone, like anything, my son plays basketball. There's always going to be somebody faster, who could jump higher, who can shoot better, who could play better defense. Like there's always going to be somebody better either at all those things than you are, or at least, one or some of them. And that's why you have to work hard at whatever it is you're trying to do so that you can become good at it. Because, that's a question kids ask all the time. How did you get good at this? How did so-and-so get good at this? And the passion and practice, right, is commitment to actually getting better, right? And that's a very human paradigm, right? As we learn from repetition, we learn from immersing ourselves, we learn from trying over and over again, to touch the rim or whatever it is you're trying to do, right? And you don't get on the first time, you don't give up, you keep trying and you keep trying and keep trying. And so that's, I hope that we're not losing that grit that I think makes humans, and humanity unique and compelling, at least from that lens. And that POV, I think everything that you talked about isn't scary to me. I'd love to work 3 days a week, 6 hours a day. I would love to have some life set up where, to your point about the robots doing all the work for us, that it's convenient and it's seamless. So getting to that place is going to be, the journey is always the fun part, right? Not just the destination. And I think it'll be interesting to see what this journey is and where we end up in 3 to 5 years. There's a lot of different POVs, that's for sure.
Yeah, a lot of potential scenarios, right?
Yes.
Like one of the I
Gary?
think, Rick, what you described involves some kind of universal income, which is, there's a lot of resistance to that concept, right?
My argument to that is, remember, Native Americans lived without a monetary system for almost 8,000 years. So there's examples of civilizations on the planet for a long time that did not have money. How did they live, right? That's the thing.
Well, they saw value in other things other than paper money, right? I mean, paper money was basically a promise. It's a promissory note is what money started as, right?
Right.
Even banks, right? Like back in the day, the original banks, I will hold your money, right? And I will give you a piece of paper that says that I owe you this much money.
Right.
So, I mean, it just became easier to trade than cows.
Well,
and grain.
Or chickens
right.
and grain.
And
yeah,
Rick,
exactly.
they were still dealing with survival, right? Like, so part
Right,
of
they
their
didn't have
life was
survival
finding
figures.
food and making food and finding shelters.
And building the fort to protect the neighbor. Yeah,
right. So some of the things you
Exactly.
described was part of their existence, but I don't disagree. So yeah, I think it's interesting and exciting. Like if I were to put in my 2 cents on that question, it's just, I think it's unknown. I think we're trained to have fear. Like that's what the media is going to spend a lot of time doing, is generating fear around these concepts instead of potentially solutions. So yeah, we're supposed to be afraid that AGI is going to happen and the robots are going to kill all humanity because that's the most efficient way for the robots.
And we're back to the Terminator.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I don't know what the
Terminator.
robots are going to do like after we're gone, but okay.
Full circle. Yeah, they'll be bored. There'll be no humans to mess with. They'll be just, yeah.
So I'm not focused on the fear side of it. I'm focused on kind of the things you guys have been talking about, the creativity, the expression, and I'd like doing simple things. I said this recently in a podcast, like I like sending AI birthday greetings to my family. Like I love the fact that I can come up with an idea and execute it in a few hours or less, sometimes a few minutes. And it's much more personal than just sending a text that says happy birthday. So I love playing with these tools.
We had a guy at Heavy Iron who was the most epic Photoshopper of people in the studio into various things. I still have one of my favorite things ever is he put my face inside the 40-Year-Old Virgin movie poster.
Oh, nice.
Perfect.
And it's so good. It's frightening how good it is. And it is hilarious. The point of that anecdote was now we've got guys, at the studio who are jumping into Gemini or whatever and creating all kinds of cool things for their backgrounds in our meetings. And they're things that are game related or our product or IP related. It's fun. And it's
fun.
Every day there's a new one. And then you find the guy, we all of us like yours the best. So we kind of,
we stole it.
Everyone
crowdsource vote, Yeah.
Well, flattery, like it's imitation's the best form of flattery, right?
Or another way, I think it speaks to what Rick is talking about in terms of being an author or a creator, composer, whatever it is. Whatever it is that you're trying to create. I think that it's another small anecdotal example of using really at that point, AI to entertain people, right? It just keeps our phone calls a little bit more, lighthearted and fun when we've got somebody who's really good at making something entertaining, engaging.
I do like not taking notes in meetings anymore and getting a summary of the meeting notes right after the meeting.
Although sometimes they do get it quite wrong.
You do have to double check the word.
That's why you use
double check the word.
transcribe. Use transcribe.
Then you have to be careful what you say.
All right, Rick.
Yeah, be
bring us
careful what
home.
you say.
This is a great conversation.
Another great episode. Thank you, Lyle Hall, for all of your sage, wise wisdom and antidotes. We look forward to posting this and seeing how many people flood to the site to watch the effluent sounds of Lyle Hall.
Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun talking with both of you guys.
And
let's do this again.
Yeah, let's do it again. I can't wait to hear what's next for you because you are always prolific in your outputs. So
I'd love to do a follow-up and watch your whole journey on launching your game, right?
That'd be great. I'd love to.
Are you self-publishing or do you have a publisher? Can you say?
Our publisher's Daybreak Game Company.
Daybreak. Okay. I know them. Yeah. So it'd be good to learn that journey. Everybody is in the same boat now as the whole industry is upside down. So,
well, it's going to be interesting. We're obviously you see a lot of sequels, whether it's GTA 6 or it's one of the Call of Duties, but this is a sequel from 5 years ago. We've had a rabid audience of players from the first game that are so excited to know that there's a second game coming out. And they've been really vocal about that excitement.
Good.
So it's great to see a community, as you referenced earlier in the call.
Is there a Discord server that we could pimp out and have people join?
There is. I wish I knew what it was.
All right.
Send us the link and I'll add it.
I don't have it off the top of my head. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, I'll add it to the
We definitely do.
The podcast. And I can't wait to play. It's coming out soon.
Yeah.
So look forward to playing.
It is. Thanks, guys.
Good
All right.
work.
Thanks, Lyle.
Yep.
Thanks, Lyle.
Take care.
Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Everything's fine, we're shipping on time. Everything's fine, we're shipping on time. Everything is fine, we're shipping on time. I'm hearing good things, we're shipping on time. Take some deep breaths, we're shipping on time. Let me solve that, we're shipping on time. Everything is fine.